Commission's regular meeting on April 19th. It is 7.
Do you have your mic on, Commissioner O'Neill?
I'm so sorry.
We'll restart.
Good evening and welcome to Lakewood Planning Commission regular meeting, April 19th. Could you call for roll, please?
Commissioner Buckley?
Here.
Commissioner Furman?
Here.
Commissioner Grebley-Unis?
Here.
Commissioner Kittner?
Here.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Here.
Commissioner Peters?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Could you read the first?
Item 3, approve March 15th, 2023 PC meeting minutes. And I see that there is already an amendment that I would like to make on item 4, election of vice chair. Commissioner Kittner amending denies to decline the nomination.
Commissioner Grebley-Unis.
I believe I'm on the attendance for that and need to be removed from the attendance of that.
Noted.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Kettner.
I was just going to make the motion unless there are other amendments. I would like to move that we adopt the Planning Commission meeting minutes of March 15th, 2023 as amended.
Second.
Can we call for a vote?
Commissioner Buckley?
Yes.
Commissioner Furman?
Yes.
Commissioner Grebley-Unis?
Yes.
Commissioner Kittner?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Yes.
Commissioner Peters?
Yes.
Can you display the votes? We all, yes, y'all should press it. Including Chair O'Neill. And it passes. Great.
Could you please read the next agenda item?
Item 4, PL 23-0001, 3 Mile Plan, discussion and action. And I'm gonna set up really quickly. Hello, Commissioners. My name is Kayla Redd, and I'm the Planning Technician with the Development Assistance Team here at the City of Lakewood. This presentation is for the April 19th, 2023 Planning Commission regular meeting to consider, discuss, vote on case PL 23-0001, the 3 Mile Plan. The request tonight is for the Planning Commission to adopt the 2023 3 Mile Plan and recommend approval to City Council. What is a 3-mile plan? The 3-mile plan is a long-range plan required by the state of Colorado that outlines where municipalities intend to annex property and describes how they will ensure the adequate provision of services within the newly annexed territory and the remainder of the existing municipality. Here, the municipality will only annex land where it is consistent with pre-existing plans for the surrounding area. Colorado revised state statutes restricts annexation of an incorporated municipality that would result in any extension to that municipal boundary by more than 3 miles in any direction from any point in a single year. This would be applicable to any unincorporated land. The municipality is subject to detailing adequate provision of services and plans such as utilities, infrastructure, public services, character, and land use for all eligible annexable land. This is accomplished through the Lakewood 3-mile plan by referencing applicable, comprehensive, sustainable, and other citywide plans in addition to applicable Jefferson County plans. Here, there's a map presented which depicts the proposed 2023 3-mile plan, outlining the municipal boundary by the City of Lakewood, regional jurisdictional boundaries, the 3-mile annexable area, and annexable enclaves located within the municipal boundary of the City of Lakewood. The 3-mile plan references any independent and applicable land use plans, which indicate how requirements in addressing utility, infrastructure, public services, character, and land use are met. Shown is a graphic representation of the reference plans in the 3-mile plan. For all areas, the Lakewood Comprehensive Plan is our primary document considered when reviewing land uses associated with proposed annexations. This takes into account all land that is functionally related to the growth of the municipality. The Jefferson County Comprehensive Area Plan shall be incorporated and used as a secondary resource for annexation guidance. As shown on the map, these area plans would be applicable to petition into the City of Lakewood from the west, south, north, and northwest. All applicable plans referenced in the Lakewood 3-mile plan 2023 have not been updated since the adoption of the 2018 3-mile plan. Pursuant of the requirements set forth in the Colorado revised state statutes, staff recommends that the Lakewood Planning Commission adopt and recommend City Council the approval of the 2023 3-mile plan, case PL 23-0001. And this concludes the presentation for the Planning Commission public hearing for April 19th, 2023. If you have any other questions or comments regarding the presentation, you can comment after. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Redd. Are there any questions or comments that Commission would like to discuss on the 3-mile plan?
Should we have public comment first?
Probably.
And Chair O'Neill, did you open the public hearing? Oh, okay.
So for public comment at this time, you can call in by telephone 720-707-2699 and press 9 to request to speak. You will be prompted to speak when you press 6 to unmute. Oh, star 9. Sorry. Press star 9 to request to speak. You'll be prompted when to speak. Press star 6 to unmute. You may also provide live commenting once permitted to do so on Lakewood Speaks. If you would like to provide public comment online, please visit lakewoodspeaks.org.
Can you also read the code for Zoom?
Oh, yes. So to join the Zoom public comment by iPad, iPhone, or Android device on the Zoom app, enter webinar ID 858-4658-9434. Thanks.
Do any commissioners have comments or questions?
Commissioner Kettner?
I just wanted to mention that it's rather interesting. Like you mentioned, the map has not changed in many years, but the next time we see this, it will be changed. We do have an annexation coming up. It is in Ward 1. And the annexation itself is not quasi-judicial, and we are able to talk about the annexation. But I just wanted to remind everybody it's really hard to talk about annexation without talking about the land use. And the land use is part of the initial zoning that we will be making a recommendation on, and that is quasi-judicial and something that we're not supposed to have the conversations on. So I just kind of wanted to mention that. And we will be the city charter does require the planning commission to make a recommendation to city council on the annexation. So I would think we would be hearing the annexation petition was just accepted by city council a little over a week ago. So the process has started. So I would assume that that annexation recommendation would be coming to us fairly soon. So I just want to mention that. Thank you.
And just to be clear, we do have one more pending annexation that staff is reviewing over parkland.
When it's when it's parkland, does it have that same petition process?
Yes, it'll be the same.
Okay, thank you.
Chair O'Neill, there is no one in the waiting room and no one commented on Lakewood Speaks if you'd like to close the hearing.
So at this time, we'll close public comment. And I think we have a comment then by Commissioner Peters.
You answered my immediate question, which was, are there other annexations? And I understand we have the parkland. Are there any others that might be upcoming in future years that this updated map could potentially help, move those along? Any upcoming ones?
None that I'm aware of. Mr. Rice, do you have?
Right. Kayla mentioned the piece of park property. That was a little bit of a surprise to us, and I think community resources it wasn't something that was immediately on their calendar. So in the near term, the next year, 2, 3, nothing on the horizon for annexation.
Thank you.
Can we go ahead and call for a motion then?
Unless there's any other comments or questions.
Any other comments or questions before we call for a motion? Nothing on Lakewood Speaks because that's closed, correct? Okay. I'd like to call for a motion then.
Thank you, Chair. I move that the Planning Commission adopt the facts and finding and order as presented in the staff report for case number PL 23-0001 and adopt the 2023 3-mile plan and recommend that City Council approve the City of Lakewood 2023 3-mile plan.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Buckley and Commissioner Kettner. Can we go ahead and call for a vote then?
Mr. Rice, are you going to call or will I?
I can do it while I'm sitting here. Commissioner Buckley?
Yes.
Commissioner Furman?
Yes.
Commissioner Kettner?
Oops. Yes.
Commissioner Gribbel-Eunice?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Yes.
Commissioner Peters?
Yes.
And the vote passes 6 yeas.
I don't, nobody's vote is showing up here on the display. Oh. Now it is.
You should be able to
try again. Ms. Red, could you read the next agenda item?
Item 5, approve in-person hybrid meeting format.
So we're just discussing this item.
Correct. At our last Planning Commission meeting, everybody kind of verbally agreed to move to the hybrid format, and then I think the commission wanted to formally vote on it so that everybody was clear, is why that's on this particular agenda item.
Okay. Are there comments or questions by any commissioners on this topic? Commissioner Buckley?
Thank you, Chair Neal. Just to clarify what we're voting on, this hybrid arrangement will be the default meeting format going forward if we are to vote yes for meetings where we have a case. But if there's no case or it's just a study session, then we will be continuing to meet virtually. Do I understand that correctly?
That is correct.
Okay. And do we need to, at some point, do this same approval of a hybrid meeting format for Board of Adjustment cases? We don't have those as often, but separate board, or can we do both in this meeting?
We could do that separate, and I think the next time the Board of Adjustment meets, we can put that as part of the agenda item, and when you are the board, you can vote on that as well.
Okay, thanks. That's all.
Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Kettner.
Thank you. Ms. Stanek, this was, your recommendation that we do this. Would you like us to make a motion and a second and vote on it?
Yes, that would be my preference, Commissioner Kettner.
Okay. Then since we don't have this written down, if you could just, listen and let me know if I should do anything differently. Are you ready, Chair, for me to attempt a motion?
Let's call for a motion.
Thank you. I move that the Planning Commission hold meetings hybrid as long as there is a case. If the Planning Commission is meeting in either study session or in a meeting where there is no case with a public hearing, then our meetings will be virtual.
Second.
Can we call for a vote?
Commissioner Buckley?
Yes.
Commissioner Furman?
Yes.
Commissioner Grebliunas?
Yes.
Commissioner Kettner?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Yes.
Commissioner Peters?
Yes.
That passes 6 yes.
Ms. Red, could you read the next agenda item, please?
Item 6, election of officers.
Are there any comments on election of officers? Commissioner Furman.
The same reason that we postponed it last time, I think still holds true. Since we have a couple of seats that one has to be reappointed or changed and another one needs to be appointed, I recommend that we postpone this again.
Do we have a second for that?
Second.
Could we call for a vote?
Commissioner Buckley?
Yes.
Commissioner Furman?
Yes.
Commissioner Grebliunas?
Yes.
Commissioner Kettner?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Yes.
Commissioner Peters?
Yes.
Commissioner Grebliunas, could you vote one more time on that? Perfect. And that passes.
And then the next agenda item, please.
Item 7, CC affordable housing discussion.
Chair, do you mind? So We had talked about at the last meeting, I believe Commissioner Buckley brought this up, that council had kind of directed the Planning Commission to look at affordable housing topics. And a part of your packet, you will have a council request from Councilor Stewart. And if you've read, do you not have that? Yeah, and the later email that Kayla had sent out, that was included, and essentially it's kind of a summation of Councilor Stewart's discussion at that council meeting. And the direction was to look at a smaller lot zoning district where there are some additional options, and so that's kind of the direction. From a staff standpoint, in talking with the commission, if you're looking at creating a new zone district, I think the most appropriate time is to roll that in with a comprehensive plan update. I know Roger Wadnall is going to be coming probably early summer, late summer, to give the commission an update on where they're at with the comprehensive plan and when they'll get to the planning commission. But that's an item that kind of rolls along. Zoning changes, comprehensive plan update, those would go together. May I make one more comment? One of the things I read when I read through Councilor Stewart's summary there, it must have been 2016, City Council looked at a series of items they were looking at mending in the zoning code, and one of those staff came back with was an R10 zone district. So it's residential, it was single family, and there was no lot size. And so that kind of hits on some of her points that she summarized there. I'm not saying that's the best way to handle it, but staff did look at some different options. So I think as we move into that, it might be beneficial to bring that back and kind of do a summary for you, what the district was, kind of what the intent was and so forth, and we can start there. And then, of course, we're looking for direction from the commission as well.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. So when you say R10 as a new district and there's no lot size, that means there's no minimum lot size, there's no setbacks? I mean, what would the setbacks be based on?
There were setbacks. With the lot size, there was no minimum lot size. And what that might allow, have you heard the term cottage homes? Mm-hmm. So you could have multiple homes on one lot. And so there isn't a minimum or kind of a maximum lot size. So depending on what that lot ended up with. Another product type, there was a rezoning request down in Ward 5, Hamden and Wadsworth. I can't remember the date. And they came in with a product. Essentially, it was a townhome with walls. There was about 3 feet, 6 feet between the townhomes. And so it was a much smaller lot size as well. It was a different product. And Commissioner Gribble-Eunice is nodding his head. He's familiar with that housing product as well. It's a way to get more, I'm going to use this term, entry-level homes in. They're still expensive, but you can get more density on
less
acreage. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments or questions by any commissioners on this?
And Commissioner Buckley does have his hand up.
Oh, so thank you. Commissioner Buckley, please.
Thank you. A couple questions for Mr. Rice. If we do want to go the route of wrapping this into the comprehensive plan process, what's the timeline for exactly when we'd hear an update from Mr. Wadnall and when there could be a zoning ordinance change? And my concern in asking this question is that I understand the comprehensive plan process is going to be a rather long process. And, we're looking, I think based on what you've previously told us, maybe 2 years before the plan gets adopted, and the zoning ordinance amendments comes after that. And so that just seems like a long time to wait for something the council's requested us to do now. So is there a way we could evaluate doing something to create a new zone district or amend existing zoning districts, or just do anything on this request on a faster time frame?
Two questions. I'll take the first one. So my understanding in talking with Roger is that the zoning amendment will follow, it will be concurrent with or follow shortly after the comprehensive plan update. And I think they're looking at a 2025 spring, late spring, early summer 2025 adoption date is what I recall. So that's your response to your first question. The second one, can you do something more quickly? The answer is yes. I think you may need some more direction if you're from City Council, if you're looking at coming to them with a district ahead of that. So I'm not sure what to tell you at this point in time. It was a discussion point. It's something council is interested in. I don't know that you have a lot of direction, or staff for that matter has a lot of direction in moving ahead of that comprehensive planning zoning process.
Okay, thank you for answering both those questions. Yeah, so I'm glad I was remembering correctly. I thought it was about 2 years from now. You said spring 2025. That is in 2 years. I guess I agree with you that we don't have very clear direction, but it would be my preference. Perhaps we can have a study session. We could review the materials to begin with from the R10 zone district. I'd be interested in not just reviewing those materials, but some of the discussion around it and why it never went anywhere. And maybe we can pick up there and change something and make it go somewhere. And have a study session with that with a little bit more material in front of us, since there's been some work done on a similar idea in the past. And maybe just tonight too in this conversation, other people would have ideas of things they'd want us to look at. I'll throw out an idea of something else we could look at a study session. It may be calling it R10 is the wrong choice. Maybe we do want a minimum lot size of, I don't know, 1,500, 2,000, 3,000 square feet. I guess I'd like to see, some visual representations of the different kinds of products like you were discussing, whether it's possible on the different lot sizes. I can understand that maybe some members of the community might have heartburn with literally zero. I mean, of course, it's geometrically impossible to make a lot that's 0 square feet, but having no minimum at all maybe isn't the best thing. So maybe we set a very low minimum that's above 0. And I'd like some more just guidance of examples of what's possible to try to intelligently set that number. And I'll throw out a second idea too, and I welcome feedback on this from staff and from all the rest of my commissioners as well. Maybe to encourage more affordable ownership housing was the phrasing in the request. We could do something like a zone district that I'll call R3 for a moment. We have an R2 district that allows single family and duplexes. Maybe an R3 could allow single family duplexes and say what we call attached homes. As we had a discussion on this commission just a few months ago that there's a distinction in our code between attached housing and multifamily housing. And of course, when we do zoning, we can only regulate uses, not users. But I think the pattern that we've observed with use is that things that we call attached housing, townhomes, typically, more often than not, end up being owner-occupied, and things that we call multifamily housing, typically, not always, but more often than not, end up being rental units. And so maybe we can indirectly get at an inducement or nudge to build more affordable ownership housing ideas if we had a zone district that allowed attached housing and not multifamily housing. I think that kind of goes along with the smaller lot size idea too. If you have literally attached townhomes with no separation between them, you have no side setbacks, you can make the lots a lot smaller. It's it's the same principle as a smaller lot size. It's dividing up more units on the same amount of land being one of the most expensive inputs to development. So all else being equal, it should be a little bit lower cost to construct and somewhat cheaper to sell than a single family home on a larger lot, for sure. So those are my ideas. I'll sit back and listen to staff's reaction and the rest of the commission, and I'll just say again, I'd like a study session to maybe dive into more of these ideas that I just brought forward and whatever everyone else has to say tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Buckley. Mr. Rice, do you have any response or comment to any of that? I guess my question to you for staff would be, I think a lot of the ideas that Commissioner Buckley brought up are good ideas. Definitely setting a minimum lot line seems, or lot size seems prudent, I think. However, I guess I'm curious about placement on a zoning map. Have you guys internally discussed how that would look? It seems like we talk about affordable housing, and affordable housing happens over here, and then all the other houses happen over here, which creates, poor neighborhoods and wealthy neighborhoods. And what everyone who has studied this understands is that the mix of economic neighborhoods is what's the healthiest for housing and for people. And so I'm just curious, this R10 or whatever it ends up being called, or how this would be implemented. Has there been any internal discussion on intermingling that within neighborhoods and not making it just an R10, which starts to become kind of project-like, I'm just curious what those discussions have been.
And that's actually a good question. If you go back to a couple weeks ago when we were looking at the CRL zone district and not actually mapping it, that's what we were doing with the R10 back in 2016. The project, things are starting to come back to me. It was Richmond Homes down at Hamden and Wadsworth. They were the issue that came up, and the R10, where that came from is developers were looking at doing attached homes or detached homes on much smaller lots than 5,000 square feet, and there wasn't a zone district, so they had to go to a mixed-use zone district. When you get into the mixed-use zone districts, the commission knows, you're approving a district with all of those uses, which includes multifamily, commercial, retail, office, some auto uses, restaurants, and things like that. And so now the developer is looking at a zone district that maybe the neighbors don't necessarily support. So that was the compromise with the R10. So it was running ahead of that Richmond rezoning project, but it would have created a zone district that applicants would have rezoned to. So at the time, staff was not looking at placing it on a map, just giving more options where it's a single family zone district, right? So you have to do single family residential, but it didn't allow for that other mix of uses that residents were concerned about. So we haven't looked at mapping. That mapping piece would come as part of the comprehensive plan process. So they will go through as part of that and look at land uses, create their sub-areas and so forth. And then if there is direction, there's a will to remap, that'll go along with the comprehensive plan / zoning remapping update.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Grublianis.
And as part of that, you'll understand that the R10 is intended to have a 0 square foot area. That gives a lot of flexibility to whoever is going to be developing this property with the intent that if they're going to be rezoning it, are they also submitting a plan for what that property would look like as part of that rezoning for approval?
With the rezoning process, a they're required to submit a conceptual site plan. But the concept plan generally is, the basic answer is no. You get a concept plan that applies the standards, because there still were regulations for parking requirements, landscaping, setbacks, heights, and things like that. But they were not submitting a kind of a more formalized site plan, so the commission was not approving a site plan. Essentially, the zone district and then whatever design concept would be a separate process.
Gotcha, but would the rezoning be approved before anyone would even see what the potential layout of the site is?
Most likely not.
Okay. And I guess that's kind of where my thought process was going, is that by having a 0 square foot area, it does kind of open up the possibility of some creative exploration of how these lots can be used to maximize functional living spaces, increase housing quantity, and in terms of affordability, a smaller structure is going to inherently just be more affordable than a larger structure. So you're potentially solving kind of two of the key issues when it comes to affordable housing by maintaining that zero size, because ideally they're still going to be functional residences. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have market value. But I guess that was the point I was just trying to make.
If no one else has, I just realized I'm the only one that sees the hand raised.
My hand's up, but I don't have to go now.
Oh, it is? Oh, I'm sorry. Now I'm seeing that.
Everybody wants to see
Yes.
that.
So I just had a quick follow-up question to what Commissioner Gribliana said, and I'm wondering if there was any discussion of height restriction, or how that bulk plane is being dealt with, things like that, if they were tight together.
I don't recall the actual height for that particular district. At a minimum, it would have been 35 feet, which is what the R1, R2, RMF, maybe RMF's 45 feet. So it would have been a minimum of 35 feet, or you get to that maximum, right? So somewhere between 35 and 45 feet is the height that was proposed for that particular district. I don't recall. It's not something where you would end up with very large structures. It was more residential in scale. In fact, I don't even think 45 feet would be appropriate in that district, is what they were thinking of, right?
Thank you. I didn't see when everyone raised their hands, so I'm just going to go alphabetical. So Commissioner Furman. And I'm so sorry, everyone.
Thanks. I don't blame you. There's a lot to juggle. Well, I'll try and be quick. I tend to agree with, assuming this is one of the things that Commissioner Buckley was getting at, is that the waiting for the comprehensive plan does seem like a long time, especially considering we have already recently looked at an additional zone district, even without it having a particularly mapped location. So I think there's a reasonable argument, both because we have already done that, looked at a new zone district, but also the argument you mentioned regarding why Richmond wanted it, which is to provide an option for a developer to be able to rezone to that would be more agreeable to neighbors. So I can imagine this being a useful zone district to developers to be able to use in more of a near term than it would take for the new comprehensive plan. So I can see an argument for looking at it sooner. I understand the obstacles there and the problems involved, but I can certainly see a benefit to that. The other thing I wanted to mention, sorry, I keep looking down my notes, but I think there's other options to control the way the size of the lots works out, whether you could begin to work at a ratio, sort of minimum ratio, to prevent ending up with weird lots. But I think there's ways to achieve that and still have roughly the zero, minimums, but also still achieve lots that make sense. I think you do run some risks of some really weird situations with the absolute zero. So whether you're seeking some sort of minimum ratio or something like that. But anyway, those are my comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Furman. Commissioner Kettner.
Thank you. I'm going to echo a lot of what you just said, especially looking at my notes here. So I wanted to start out by agreeing with a lot of my notes were what Commissioner Buckley started with. Another support of doing this sooner rather than later. Our current zoning ordinance, the big change to it, went into effect in April of 2013, and we didn't adopt the comprehensive plan until 2015. So there's even precedent for doing that, although I do agree that a general land use pattern is better done with the comprehensive plan first, and I appreciate that, but I hope that we are able to move it forward before that. So I would also be more in favor of something like an R2 or 3, something with some kind of a minimum lot size. And I really see this useful, like just off of Colfax or even along Colfax, where in wards 1 and 2, as a buffer in between those single-family neighborhoods and Colfax. Yeah. So I think that it would be very useful there. And one of my biggest, and then I just kind of wanted to mention and make sure that we all, and I, for myself to include it, that the request is about affordable ownership. Because I agree wholeheartedly with Chair O'Neill's comment about trying to spread out affordable housing. One of the problems with that is LIHTC, low-income housing tax credits, that are used to build them, and LIHTC requires that the housing is built in the area of the lower income of the people who you're serving. So it's really a hard thing, because I totally agree with the concept of what you're talking, but I think this request is about ownership, so I don't know that that really comes into play with that, because we don't have, but it's a great lead into what I want to suggest, because currently we don't have any ownership opportunities that are AMI limited like we do with rental options. And inclusionary zoning, a requirement that new developments include affordable income restricted units, typically, the 30% of AMI, or 30% up to about 80% AMI, can also be used for ownership. And I think that may be something that this commission would also like to look into. I think we currently have 2 single-family housing developments under construction, one in the Green Mountain area and one in Ward 3, kind of across the street, sort of from White Fence Farm, adjacent to the county. Right? Isn't that a single-family home development?
Yes.
And were each of those more than 10 single-family homes? I think they were, because they came to us for subdivision.
Yes. I can't recall the exact project, but yes, it was more than 10.
So if we were to recommend, for example, which is 10 to 20% is kind of a common number for inclusionary zoning, then currently we would have 2 home ownership opportunities for people that we don't currently have. So that's another idea that I have that I'm hoping Commission would like to look into.
Yes, and I believe that number was 23. I think there were 23 lots out there.
Okay, thank you. So we would have 2 there, and I don't know how many in the Green Mountain area. Thank you.
29? I think it's 29.
So 2 in both places, unless we round up, and then we'd have 3 in both places. But it sounds like there might be some interest in that. And Councilor Stewart's request did specifically refer to AMI. I was a little bit concerned about multiple housing units on one lot. I think the idea of an R1, 2, or 3 is so that it's affordable ownership. And if you have more than one home on the lot, then you're probably going to have to buy more than one home, and that's not affordable. Speaking as a public school teacher, maybe to some other people, but most of us struggle to buy just one home. So I would I would lean towards against putting multiple on one lot for that reason. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention is, I think one of the ways to encourage affordable ownership is to make sure that we protect our existing, what's called naturally occurring affordable housing, which is a very feel-good term for housing that's a little bit older. And so therefore more affordable. And it would be nice to look into something to protect those, because reducing the supply of affordable ownership opportunities is almost worse than not adding to the stock. And currently we have been, there have been several of naturally occurring affordable single-family homes that have been torn down and replaced with either rental units or things that aren't quite so affordable. That was the end of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kettner. Commissioner Gribbliunas.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Kenter, for bringing up the affordable aspect of this. Because you're right, that was kind of the request of like how can we encourage use by right? And it was kind of, and I could be misremembering because I don't have it in front of me, but the concept of being able to have a use by right to duplex for sale units to a certain AMI, in terms of, does that open up the opportunity of taking an R16 lot and turning it into an R2 in, an area where it might not typically occur, if it's being sold to that certain AMI. It's a really interesting concept. And I think that's also part of what would be explored, maybe in more detail. Because, it's incentivizing to developers of creating for sale properties, still, ideally benefiting themselves, but also benefiting the community potentially. And then the other thing that came to mind, talking about affordability, is addressing the ADU requirements, taking potential small steps. They're currently allowed in quite a few zoning districts, but there's some limitations right now that make it so small lots can't actually move ahead with ADUs. So people on a R16 very well might not have a large enough lot to put an ADU on there, even if they're a few hundred square feet off. So there's the potential of lowering the minimum lot size from 9,000 to a different number that maybe we discuss at a future time. Also adjusting the potential size of ADUs. I think currently they max out at 700 square feet and one bedroom, that's, I think, just kind of as big as an ADU can be right now. So that kind of keeps small families from being able to rent an ADU because they're not really that 2-bedroom minimum. And then, lastly, in terms of how do you keep ADUs from kind of getting too large? Well, there's kind of already some stipulations in the code when it comes to accessory structures, limiting to 10% of the total lot size. So, there's potentially some small steps that could be studied and better understood to see whether or not a bigger or by opening ADUs up to smaller lots might help kind of bridge the affordability gap.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? Because we are talking about increasing ownership, and the request was for ownership. Mm-hmm. That doesn't increase ownership opportunities, though, right? Adding an ADU adds a rental. Okay, just making sure I understood that correctly. So it might be a separate topic from the affordable ownership.
Ownership.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would just add to that, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Peters, I would just add to that it does, though, create affordability for the person that owns that property to be able to create income with an ADU. It offsets a mortgage. So there is affordability kind of built into it in that way. Does that make sense?
I have heard that argument before. However, if you already own a home and you have the money to add an ADU, if you add the ADU, and I'm not saying I'm totally against it, but I think we need to recognize that now makes that property a lot more expensive. We've now made that property a lot more expensive for the next owner. Because when you add that, it increases the value. So for somebody to be able to purchase that in the future is actually more difficult.
But the market will set that ultimately. I mean, that will be set by demand. That will be set by saturation of housing. That's not something that we have the purview of predicting.
No, we have the purview of deciding whether or not how many, we allow, because it turns it into two housing units from one.
Sure.
So now you're buying two housing units when you go to buy it. So I can only, from my perspective as a public school teacher, that's not going to be an affordable product for me.
Well, again, that would be based on whatever the market value is at the time that you're looking. So it's difficult to say that, I think. In this market, I think you're correct. Right.
Well, in any market, buying two units would be more expensive in general than buying one, but not every unit is the same. So I do understand the concept of what you're saying. I just was sort of trying to make the point that the request here was for affordable ownership, not
investment properties or
rentals. Yeah. Or adding rentals. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Peters. Thanks for your patience.
No problem. I heard a lot of good ideas in the process. I definitely like this concept and support our taking it on sooner than later. I did have a quick question. What was the reasoning behind the R10 not moving forward in the past?
Here, you're going to recall on a memory, this is Paul, from a couple years ago. So council, they had 26 action items when they started. They worked with staff to come up with proposals for most of them. A lot of things they adopted. They did the step back requirement for buildings that came out of something on Union. I can't remember all the examples, what they actually did amendments for. There were multiple items that they were looking at acting on, and I think their priorities shifted. So it's not that they didn't act. There was a subcommittee, Lakewood Dialogue Committee, that was working on these. They took a first group of amendments to council. They hadn't worked through the other ones. I know there were some proposed changes to school land dedication fees, which would have been a good change. The R10 zone district, I don't know, there were 3 or 4 or 5 others that didn't move forward. And I don't think that it was lack of interest. I think it was priority shifting from that particular topic to something else. But I'd have to go back and look. So it wasn't that they didn't like the concept. There were a handful of concepts out of that process that they just didn't follow through on.
Okay, great. Well, and when you look back on that, certainly interested in any concerns or, flaws that they saw in it, but it sounds like it just wasn't a priority, and so now it's resurfacing as a priority and something that we can act on potentially. Are there any examples of R1 or, R10 or any, examples anywhere else where there's no minimum lot size?
I could do a little digging around. Probably yes. It's probably the R10 comes from the connotation within the existing zoning ordinance, right? So the R is residential.
Yes.
The 1 means single family.
Single, yeah.
And then the 0 was just not setting a lot size. So it said single family, and you have a piece of property, you have all kinds of design options was the intent. So as Commissioner Furman and Gruber Eunice have talked to, we could set a minimum lot size. For instance, if a cottage home concept is you have multiple single-family homes on one lot, and you buy the physical structure. You're not actually buying the land, because those homes, right, so they're on a perimeter, and you have a common green that people share. There aren't really
So they have to pay
individual
lot fees.
Right. There aren't individual yards per se.
Yeah.
So that's a concept that would fit in there. So it wasn't maybe the ideal solution, but it with the lack of a lot size was trying to provide the most variety of design alternatives that may come that staff didn't necessarily foresee.
Right, and that
So-
still is like renting, because you own the building, but you don't own the land, and those fees can be raised as well. So it's, yeah,
Right.
okay. Great, thank you.
Commissioner Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I do want to reemphasize some statements made earlier about the specific nature of the request having some sort of affordability requirements. That is a bigger thing that, to me, it's a bigger topic that could apply to some version of an R1 something zone district, and could apply to to other zone districts, maybe even like a RMF and a mixed use. I know there has been discussion before about it. Do we ever have a true inclusionary zoning district? And on a bigger project, it would make sense in other zone districts. And I don't know, maybe there's something in there about how we set the specific thresholds of AMI and specific incentives or specific requirements we impose upon developers that is somehow different for a deed dedicated affordable ownership opportunity versus a dedicated affordable rental unit. The request is kind of vague, so maybe it's big enough to encompass that as well. Separate topic, just my reaction to the discussion about things like ADUs and multiple homes on one lot. I would say that does accommodate affordable ownership opportunities just based on personal experience and family experience. My brother owns essentially a duplex. Maybe you could even call it an ADU in Lakewood's code, because the second unit is pretty small. They bought it like 15 years ago to accommodate his in-laws living in an apartment upstairs. It was literally an in-law suite. Both of his in-laws, God rest their soul, are no longer with us, and now it subsidizes his mortgage payment. It was subsidizing the mortgage payment anyways before, because even his in-laws were agreeing to pay some rent. And so in their particular case, knowing that they would have that rental income, they bought a more expensive house than they otherwise would have been able to afford. But also knowing that they were having that incremental income made the cost of doing that arrangement less than their cost would have been if they had bought a home on their originally envisioned home purchase budget before they had the idea to buy a home with the second in-law suite and have the in-laws move in. And so, it happened in my own family to my brother. It made him purchasing a house more affordable, and 15 years later, he's still there in the place where he lives. An active member of his community, and building some equity and the good things like that we hope to see in home ownership. And now it's also providing a very affordable rental to someone else. He rents it out for, I think, about $1,000 a month for about a 700 square foot apartment. He lives in a suburban area of the New York City metro area. $1,000 a month to rent anything in that metro area is a steal. And it's naturally that cheap because of the kind of home it is. He doesn't want a tenant who's a lot of trouble living directly upstairs from him. And, so the fact that he's found a good tenant, he's going to keep on giving that tenant a good deal as long as that person wants to stay there. And so this is another example of how we can get, naturally occurring affordable housing. It's maybe natural in that it doesn't have some sort of forced government requirement or direct taxpayer subsidy, but just the nature of what it is. It's cheap. Both my grandparents in different cities, in Springfield, Massachusetts, and Chicago, Illinois, at one point owned duplexes for many years and used the rental income also to defray living expenses. And this isn't an ownership example, but I will say that when I used to be a renter, the cheapest place I ever rented in my life was half a duplex. That's still affordability for people who are at the stage of life who need that. Yeah, I guess just my opinion and take is if we're talking specifically about the concept of affordable homeownership opportunities, multiple homes on one lot, duplexes, ADUs, still qualifies. And I'd be interested in talking about that aspect of it further as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Buckley. I had a question for staff. If it sounds like everyone is in support of discussing the affordable housing ownership piece of this before spring of 2025 to expedite at least study sessions. I think maybe we aren't voting on anything, or recommending anything to City Council. Maybe we are. I guess my question would be, is it appropriate to request updates on where the comprehensive plan discussions are from staff as part of those study sessions to inform our discussions on this piece of the affordable housing discussion?
That's actually a very good question. One thing that I mentioned, Roger was coming at a study session point. That's actually, I think, the initial contact point is going to be a joint Planning Commission City Council session. So the comp plan will be introduced at that point. At this time, I sit down with the managers group every other week and ask Roger for updates. At this point in time, for him to come in, it's not worth your time. They've just wrapped up the kind of internal meetings with all the different departments. I think they're laying out like their next steps and how they're going to come to the public. And so I can get him, I don't know that it's a big benefit at this time, what he has shared with me. They're coming, and that's where I don't think they're going to be ready to talk to council and planning commission until after July, kind of late summer.
I think that's that sounds great. I think just getting some feedback as we discuss, since that is supposed to be what we're following as the comprehensive plan or our guiding document, it would be nice to be stepping in tune instead of us going off in some other direction than the comprehensive plan. So that's great. Thank you. Commissioner Kettner.
Thank you. I appreciate that question. And I wanted to mention that, and I haven't finished listening to it, Mr. Wadnall and the comprehensive plan was discussed last week at the Design Review Commission meeting. And just to suggest, I haven't finished listening to the meeting. I did do a request and get a copy of it. I don't know if that went to all of commission. I'd originally asked for that. Do you think maybe we could send maybe we could send that out? There was a lot of information in that Design Review Committee meeting, and that might help us too. And Mr. Wadnall did do a presentation on the comprehensive plan there. Is that correct? I didn't quite get to that part yet. Listen.
I was sitting in there. I don't remember
Yes, you were there.
The comprehensive plan was part of the discussion. There's another project that's going on. I was going to save this for general business. and it's kind of a segue prior to that. So I'm listening to the commission and thinking about calendar and so forth. So Alexis Moore is a planner with the Comprehensive Planning Group. She's working on kind of a smaller, I forget exactly what it's called, kind of design plan for the Two Creeks neighborhood, specifically along Lamar Street. And she is looking at, she threw a date out of May 24th to come to the commission with a study session. I haven't confirmed that, so don't write that down. I was just going to ask you, without a topic, to pencil in May 24th. So I know that plan was discussed, Commissioner Kettner. I don't recall the comprehensive plan. I think there was some discussion about linking that into the comp plan, but I don't recall
And Commissioner Kettner, I also was present for that meeting, and I think what Roger Woodnell did do, he talked about the schedule for the comprehensive plan. He didn't go into any specifics, so he briefly mentioned, from my recollection, he mentioned that it will take about 2 years, and this first year was going to be obviously hiring, I believe, a consultant or somebody that's going to assist with revising the comprehensive plan. Then it was to meet with internally with departments to see if there were any specific updates that they wanted to see. And then I think the plan was to spend year 2 essentially drafting. So he did go over the schedule, but he didn't tell us really anything to expect or anything that that they know will be included yet.
Any further comments or questions on this topic? Oh, should we set the study session now, or how should we work with that for this particular topic? Do you want to address that at the end, or?
Since we're talking about it, do you mind having a little bit of discussion? So I'll take my general business items and talk about calendar right now, since there's a calendar question up.
Perfect.
So there is a possibility that we'll have a study session in late May. That's the next thing on the agenda. The next regular meeting that I'm foreseeing is, I think it's early June, is the Stevenson project, which we mentioned tonight. So that would be a regular meeting. I don't have the exact date in front of me. I'm pretty sure that's when it's coming. So those are the next 2 meeting items. If you want, so I'm going to throw out, if you want to continue this housing discussion, you can pick a date between the next study session date that we have and then kind of what I have on this calendar. If you want me to come back to you with I have 2 things: finding the R10 draft district that we had, and then providing some visuals of different product types. I can do that, but I'm going to need a little time because most likely it's going to be me. I don't have a staff person I can assign to assist with. So I would say don't set it until the middle of May. If you do before that, you can continue this discussion. You're not going to have many materials from staff. So you have a light calendar before you, and I need a couple of weeks to get materials if you want to review that ahead of time.
Do we have, so the Stevenson development is early June, so like first week of June potentially?
And that would be a meeting, not a study session.
I think that's a regular meeting.
I believe it's June 7th.
June
That's
7th.
that's what I've been told by Ms. Pafford.
So we
Okay.
could do our study session.
14th. Is May 14th enough time?
That's June 14th.
Oh, that's June 14th.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, June
May
7th.
10th would be regular.
Is June 14th the good time to have this discussion again with some examples and some additional information from staff?
That would give me time to prepare, and actually I could even get ahead of time to you kind of informally what I have.
That's perfect. That would be nice.
So you said June 14th?
Yeah.
June 7th is the tentative date that Ms. Pafford has suggested.
Okay, thank you.
And can I ask, are we going to do the annexation separately, or is that going to be annexation and initial zoning together?
It'll be one case. I think there's a third item there as well. I can't recall.
So it'll be all done as one?
Yeah,
Thank you.
it'll come to you as one package and presentation with separate votes.
With separate vote, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so I'll put June 14th as a study session date for continued housing discussion.
Perfect, thank you. Are there any other calendar items that we need to discuss, since we're on the topic?
Not that I have a solid date for. If you recall, the end of last year, I had 9 items that I was kind of keeping track of. They've kind of all gone away, and I don't know if it's finances, the interest rates, and so forth, but I haven't heard anything on those 9 particular topics. So the 2 that I've mentioned are something that I see getting on the calendar.
Okay.
So are we in general business now?
Should we go to the next agenda item?
Item 8, general business.
Thank you, Ms. Red.
And I just want to know, I'm going to be out on June 14th. So I don't know. Do we have any updates on appointing a commissioner? Timing for that?
I do. So the city attorney has been working with the clerk. I think that council, so there is a subcommittee that makes a recommendation to city council, and they have a proposal, 2 proposals going to council on the 24th of April, which I think is next Monday. Commissioner O'Neill has relocated from Ward 2 to Ward 5, so there's a proposal that she would step into the Ward 5 role. There's a proposal that Commissioner Furman be reappointed, and then they would start advertising for an at-large position after that point. So the new, if they go through the process, it could be a 4 to 6 week process. So from April 24th, quickly count out 4 weeks. So it would be May 24th at the earliest that council would probably have a 7th member to appoint. And I imagine with holiday in there that it may be the first part of June before you see a 7th member.
Okay, thanks.
So I could sort of ask Commissioner O'Neill, but other people might have had the same. You mentioned her moving from Ward 2 to Ward 5, but I believe she's on the commission as the at-large position, so that and Commissioner Gribbliunas is Ward 2?
That is correct.
So that did not actually affect the chair's ability to sit and stay in her position, because she still has the at-large.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that, just the way you said it.
Yes, the way I said it, she was moving from one to the other.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
The intent was she's at large, but she's physically relocating.
Yeah, thank you, yeah.
Yes. So that's the update. So the action, we'll have to see until next Monday to see what that action follow through.
The only other date on our schedule would be May 10th, and that seemed a little bit early. Or maybe May 31st?
Isn't that the holiday weekend?
That's why I didn't suggest it. May 10th seems soon. We all should have, I think, got an invitation to a special thing for all of us on May 17th, so that takes the 17th off. I just got it.
You should get an invite from the boards and commission.
So I agree with you, Chair, and I appreciate your saying that, and I'd love to, if there is another earlier date, it would be great, but I'm not sure there is.
Just, I need to see all 7 people. Is that what you're talking about? Sorry. Is that what you're?
Oh, I thought you meant to have the discussion on the housing.
Oh, no. I think giving staff more time is probably more important, but I was saying that's a long time to wait for full. It's a little unfortunate to wait, but it is what it is. Is there any other topics that we want to discuss or that people have questions on? Comments?
What's the invitation? I don't have it in my inbox.
Oh, it's a mail invitation.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Old school. Yep. It's an OG invitation. Okay.
There are no other general business items from staff.
So are we good to adjourn this evening then at 8:23? I don't have a joke. Does anybody have a joke?